Welcome back to another crochet tutorial with Cozy Rosie UK, and today I'm sharing with you how to crochet this granny square that features a 2 double crochet cluster. Now this square is being released as part of the In the Mood Granny Square blanket, where each week we're making one granny square based on the mood that we experienced over the previous 7 days. This square is the Disgusted square, which doesn't sound very nice, and I hope you never have to make it, but at the same time it's actually really pretty. If you haven't already started tracking your moods for your own In the Mood crochet blanket, you can find out all the details linked in the description box below, and also where to find your very own In the Mood tracker. The yarn that I'm using today is a self-striping yarn, which is Hayfield Spirit DK or double knitting, which is the same size as a size 3 yarn. This is a 20% wool acrylic mix, and you need between 35 and 50 meters per square. So as you can see, you're going to get quite a few squares off of one ball, and this shade is Sundown, which is 408. It's absolutely beautiful, and every square is working up a little bit different than the last, which is really great for this style of blanket because it means that all your squares are going to be ever so slightly different, not only in the stitches that you use, but also in the colours that they work up. I'm going to be using the recommended hook size, which is a 4mm crochet hook. This is just one of my old favourites that I had lying around. Of course, you're going to need a pair of scissors and a darning needle to weave in those ends. And I'm going to be showing you how to close your granny square with an almost invisible join without impacting on your stitch count. It's going to make joining really easy as well. So gather all of your materials and let's get started. We're going to be starting by placing a slip knot onto our hook and making a chain of 4. So we just yarn over, pull through 4 times. That was 1, 2, 3 and 4. We're going to slip stitch to the first chain that we made right by our slip knot and just yarning over, pulling through and straight through the loop on your hook. This is going to create a lovely ring for us to work into, and it's that middle hole that we're going to be working into, not where we just slip stitched. We're going to begin round 1 by making a chain of 3, and that chain 3 counts as our first US double crochet of the round, which is the same as a UK treble crochet. We're going to work a further 2 double crochets into that same ring. So we yarn over, working into the middle of the ring, so that lower part there. We're going to yarn over, insert our hook. I'm going to work over my tail at the same time. We yarn over to bring our loop back through, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, yarn over and pull through the next 2. We're then going to work a second. So we yarn over, we're reinserting into the middle of that ring once again, bringing our loop up, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, yarn over and pull through the next 2. So effectively what we've done is made our first block of 3 double crochets because that chain 3 counted as that first one. We're going to make our first corner by yarning over and pulling through 2 times, which makes a chain 2 space. We're then going to work a further 3 US double crochets into the center of the ring, and I'm still working over my tail at the same time. So we yarn over, reinsert into the middle to make that first double crochet. We yarn over again, reinsert into the same center of that ring to make a further double crochet. And then for a third time, we're yarning over, reinserting into the middle to make our third double crochet. We then need to make our next corner by making a chain of 2. So that's 1 and 2, before repeating that and working a further 3 double crochets into the center of that ring again. So this is 1, yarn over for number 2, and yarn over for number 3. We're going to make another corner by making our next chain 2. And we just have one final block to make of 3 double crochets. So we yarn over, still working over my tail at the same time, working 3 double crochets again into that center of the same ring. That's 2 and 3. All that's left to do is to make a final chain of 2 to make our last corner, and then we're going to slip stitch to the third chain. So there's 1, 2 and 3. Just kind of inserting through the middle there, picking up 2 loops of my chain and slip stitching to join. So we have our square with 4 blocks of 3 double crochet, giving us a total stitch count of 12 double crochets, and we have 4 chain 2 spaces at the end of round 1. Going into round 2, we're going to start with a chain of 2, and that chain 2 does not count as a stitch. We're then going to work a US double crochet into the same place as our chain 2, so where we joined. We're just yarning over and inserting, bringing our loop up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and we're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. So we yarn over, insert into the top of the next stitch, make our next double crochet, we yarn over, work into our next stitch again to work another double crochet. So you should now have 3 double crochets and that chain 2 that does not count. We've made it to our first corner, so we're going to yarn over, and into our corner space we're going to work 2 double crochets, so that's 1, back into the chain 2 corner space again for number 2. We're going to replicate that chain 2, 1 and 2, to maintain that chain 2 corner space, and then we're going to yarn over, reinsert back into the same chain 2 corner space to work a further 2 double crochets. That was number 1, and this is number 2. We're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. Your first stitch may just be hidden underneath your corner, so you can move that out of the way and follow that post up to the first stitch. You can just see there's a little hole there, and we're working 1 double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. So that's 1, 2 and 3. We're back to our corner again, and we're going to work our 2 double crochet, so that's 1 and 2, all into that same chain 2 space. We're going to repeat our chain of 2 to maintain our chain 2 corner space before working back into that same space, working a further 2 double crochets. So that was 1 and 2. Once again, we're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. It's going to follow that up, move my corner out of the way a little bit to make sure I can find that first stitch nice and easily. Yarn over to work the first of 3 double crochets. That was number 1. Here's number 2. And there goes number 3 into that next double crochet. We're back to our corner where we're working 2 double crochets, a chain of 2, followed by a further 2 double crochets, all into that same chain 2 corner space. I'm going to repeat this for the final time, making sure we find that first stitch just there to the side of our first stitch. So that was number 1, number 2 and number 3. We're back to our final corner where we're working 2 double crochets. That's number 1 and number 2. We make our chain of 2 before we reinsert to work a final 2 double crochets. That brings us back to where we started, and we're going to join to the top of that first stitch that we made, skipping that chain 2. So there's our first stitch, and we're just inserting our hook through the top of the stitch and slip stitching to join. At the end of round 2, you should have a total stitch count of 28 double crochets, and you should still have 4 chain 2 corner spaces. And we're going to go straight into round 3, where we're going to start using our special stitch. So the special stitch that we're using today is a 2 double crochet cluster. We're going to start by making a chain of 2, and we're going to work a double crochet into the same space as our chain 2. So we're just yarning over, inserting back into where we joined. And this counts as our first 2 double crochet cluster. We're then going to make a chain of 1, and skip the next stitch, ready to work into the next, working our first 2 double crochet cluster. So we're going to yarn over, we're skipping this next stitch and we're inserting our hook into the next. We yarn over, bring our loop up, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops and we pause there. We're going to yarn over and we're reinserting our hook into the same stitch. We yarn over to bring our loop up. We now have 4 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over and just pull through those first 2 loops, leaving 3 loops on our hook. We yarn over, pull through the remaining 3 loops, and that's our 2 double crochet cluster. We're going to yarn over and make our chain 1, and we're going to skip the next stitch, ready to work a 2 double crochet cluster into the next. So we yarn over, we skip the next stitch, working into the next, we insert our hook, yarn over, bring our loop up, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops. We're going to yarn over and reinsert into the same stitch again, yarn over, bring our loop up. We're yarning over just to pull through those first 2 loops before we yarn over and pull through the remaining 3 loops on our hook to complete our 2 double crochet cluster. So at the moment we have the equivalent of a 2 double crochet cluster, a chain 1 space, 2 double crochet cluster, another chain 1 space, and a 2 double crochet cluster. That's brought us to our first corner where we work our normal corner, which is 2 double crochets. So that's 1, yarn over and insert to the same chain 2 space. For number 2, we chain 2 to maintain that corner before working back into the same chain 2 space with a further 2 double crochets. We're going to work into this first stitch straight after our corner that sometimes can get a little bit hidden underneath those corner stitches, and we're going to be working a 2 double crochet cluster into that first stitch. So we yarn over, insert, yarn over, bring our loop up, yarn over, pull through 2, we're yarning over and reinserting into the same stitch, yarn over, bring up a 4th loop. We're going to yarn over and just pull through those first 2 loops before we yarn over and pull through all 3. We're going to follow that with a chain 1. We're going to do that 2 more times and we skip the next stitch. So we're yarning over, skip the next, insert our hook into the next stitch along, yarn over, bring a loop up, yarn over, pull through 2, we yarn over, reinsert into the same stitch again, yarn over, bring up our 4th loop, yarn over, pull through just those first 2 loops before finally yarning over and pull through all the 3 remaining loops. We're then going to chain 1, skip the next stitch and repeat that all again. So we yarn over, skipping 1, we insert into the next, yarn over, bring a loop up, yarn over, pull through 2, we yarn over again, reinserting into the same stitch, yarn over, bring our loop up, pull through just those first 2 loops before yarning over, pulling through the remaining 3 loops and making our chain 1. We're going to skip the next stitch and work into the final stitch before our corner, yarning over, skip the next, insert into that final stitch before our corner, yarn over, bring our loop up, yarn over, pull through those first 2, yarn over, reinsert into the same stitch, bring up your 4th loop, pulling through just those first 2 loops before working through all 3 loops on our hook. We don't make a chain 1 here because we're right next to our corner. Have a look to see where we are. So after our corner, we've worked into that first stitch with a 2 double crochet cluster, chained 1, skip 1 3 times. So that's the 2nd. There's the 3rd. There's our final 2 double crochet cluster. We don't chain 1 here. We're going to work straight into our chain 2 corner space, working 2 double crochets. That's 1 and 2. We chain 2 to maintain that corner space before working a further 2 double crochets into that same chain 2 space. We're going to repeat what we've just done, working along this side of our square, over this side again, and then repeating it for a third time across the third side. And I'm going to meet you in our corner space, ready to work the last part of round 3. We're working into that first stitch after our corner with our 2 double crochet cluster, followed by a chain 1. We skip the next, and we do that 3 times, where we're working our 2 double crochet clusters followed by a chain 1. So I'm doing this for the third time now. Double crochet cluster followed by a chain 1. We work our final 2 double crochet cluster into that stitch just before our corner, but we don't make a chain 1 here. We just work straight into our corner with 2 double crochets, a chain of 2, and a further 2 double crochets all into that chain 2 space, ready to repeat it all again. You continue across, and I'm going to meet you in this final corner once you've worked your final side, working your 2 double crochet clusters with a chain 1 space in between 3 times. So I've just worked my final corner, and we have just 2 stitches remaining. We're going to start by working that 2 double crochet cluster into that first stitch after our corner. So we yarn over, bring our loop up, pull through 2, yarn over, reinsert, bring our loop up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over to pull through the last 3. We're going to make a chain 1, and then we are ready to join to the top of that first double crochet that we made. So there's our chain of 2, and we're joining into the top of the stitch. So we just slip stitch to join. So at the end of round 3, you're going to have 16 2 double crochet clusters. So 1, 2, 3, 4 on each side of your square. And then you've got your corners, which have 4 double crochets in each, meaning 16 double crochets, and your 4 chain 2 corner spaces. So for round 4, we're going to start by slip stitching into this chain 1 space. So from where we are, we're just inserting our hook into the next chain 1 space and slip stitching. We're then going to make a chain of 2, which does not count as a stitch, working a double crochet into that chain 1 space, followed by a chain 1. We're going to skip over our 2 double crochet cluster and work into the chain 1 space, working 1 double crochet, followed by a chain 1. We're going to skip the next stitch, working a double crochet into the next. So we skip 1, working a double crochet into the next, and we work a final double crochet into the next stitch. So far we slip stitched into that chain 1 space, working a chain of 2 and a double crochet into that same chain 1 space. We made a chain 1, skipped over the 2 double crochet, working a double crochet into the chain 1. We chained 1, skipped the next 2 double crochet cluster before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. So it should look a little bit like that. Into our corner, we are making our 2 double crochets. So that's 1 and 2. We then chain 2 before working a further 2 double crochets into that same chain 2 corner space. I'm going to move my stitches around so I can see that first stitch as always. We're then going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches after our corner. So make sure you found that first one. We work 1 double crochet and then another double crochet into the next. So it looks like we have 4 stitches in a row. We're then going to chain 1. We skip the next stitch, which brings us to our chain 1 space, where we're working 1 double crochet and a chain 1 3 times. So we skip the next, working into the chain 1 space, working our double crochet, chain 1, skip the next for the second time. We yarn over, insert into the next chain 1 space for the third time, working a double crochet, a chain 1, and we skip the next, We're then going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches, which brings us back to our next corner. Into our corner we are working 2 double crochets, that's 1 and 2, we chain 2 before working a further 2 double crochets into the same corner. We're going to repeat this around, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches, we chain 1, skip that 2 double crochet cluster from the previous round, working a double crochet into the chain 1 space and a chain 1. We then skip, double crochet, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet, chain 1, skip 1, before working 1 double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches and then working into our corner as normal. So you can continue to repeat that around the next 2 sides of your square, and I will meet you when you reach your final corner, ready to work those last few stitches together. So just working my final double crochet into my final corner, and we are going to work a double crochet into the next 2 stitches. So that's 1 and there's number 2. After that final corner we're going to chain 1, skip over that 2 double crochet cluster, working a double crochet into the next. We then chain 1 and then we are ready to join to the top of that first double crochet that we made. So we skip the chain 2, there's the post of that first stitch, and we're just inserting our hook into the top of that double crochet that we made and slip stitching to join. So on each side of your granny square is going to make it easier for you to count. I think you should have 1, 2, 3, 4 double crochets. So you look like you've got 4 chain 1 spaces, you've got a further 4 double crochets, and then you've got your chain 2 corner spaces. So your total stitch count for round 4 will be 44 double crochets, 16 chain 1 spaces, so 4 on each side, and then you've got your 4 chain 2 spaces for your corners as well. Going into round 5, we're heading back into working our 2 double crochet clusters, and we're going to begin by slip stitching into the next chain 1 space. So we've joined into this double crochet, so we're inserting our hook into that chain 1 space and slip stitching. We're then going to make our chain of 2. This does not count as a stitch on its own. We're going to work a double crochet into that same chain 1 space, and together this counts as our first 2 double crochet cluster. We're going to chain 1, skip that double crochet underneath, and working into that chain 1 space we're making a 2 double crochet cluster. So we yarn over, insert, bring our loop up, yarn over, pull through 2, we yarn over, reinsert into the same chain 1 space, yarn over, pull through 2, we then yarn over, pull through all 3 loops, and then we chain 1, we skip the next, and we're working a 2 double crochet cluster into the next. So we skip 1, insert our hook into the next, bring our loop up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, reinsert into the same, bring our loop up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through the remaining 3, and this time we're making a chain of 2. So we chain 1, yarn over again to make that second chain, and we skip the next 2 stitches, ready to work into our corner. Into our corner we are working 2 double crochets, that's number 2, we chain 2 before working a further 2 double crochets into the same chain 2 corner space. We are then going to make a chain of 2, and we skip the next 2 stitches before we work into the 3rd stitch along. So here's 1, 2, and there we are. And we're going to be working a 2 double crochet cluster. We then chain 1, and we're skipping that next stitch, ready to work into our chain 1 spaces. So we're working a 2 double crochet cluster into the next chain 1 space. We chain 1, skip over the next stitch before working into that next chain 1 space with a further 2 double crochet cluster. Chain 1, skip the next, working into the next chain 1 space with our 2 double crochet cluster. We chain 1 once again. We've got another chain 1 space to work our 2 double crochet cluster into. Oops, go over enough loops there. We chain 1, we skip the next, and this time we're working our 2 double crochet into the top of that next stitch. So we've skipped 1 and then we've worked our 2 double crochet into the next along. And this time, because we're going to work our chain of 2, which brings us over to our corner. So we're working 2 double crochets followed by a chain of 2 to maintain that corner space, and then we're working a further 2 double crochets into that same chain 2 space. So this is what your total row should look like. If I move my hook out of the way, you've got your corner here, so you've got your 2 double crochets into your corner. We chain 2, skip 2, then we worked a 2 double crochet cluster followed by a chain 1, skip the next, 2 double crochet cluster, chain 1 into each of the chain 1 spaces along. We skip that next double crochet, working a final 2 double crochet cluster into the top of that next stitch, chain 2, skip 2, back into our corner. So repeat that all the way around your next 2 sides, and I'll meet you in your final corner where we can work those last few stitches together. Don't forget you're starting off with your chain of 2, skip 2, and then work your 2 double crochet cluster into that 3rd stitch along. I'll see you once you've reached your final corner and we can work those last few stitches together. Just working my final double crochet into my final corner. We're going to make a chain of 2 when we've finished that corner. We skip those next 2 stitches, working a 2 double crochet into the next. We chain 1, working into that next chain 1 space, working a 2 double crochet cluster. We chain 1, skipping over that next double crochet, working into our final chain 1 space with a 2 double crochet cluster. We chain 1, and then we are ready to slip stitch to join to the top of that first double crochet that we made. So there's our chain 2, there's our post of our stitch, and we're just inserting our hook into the top of that stitch and slip stitching to join. That's quite a detailed round, that one, wasn't it? So at the end of round 5 on each side, you should have a chain 2 corner space at each end, your 2 double crochets. I'm moving in from the sides here. Got a chain 2 corner, chain 2 space on each side, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 2 double crochet clusters with 5 chain 1 spaces in between those 2 double crochet clusters. Your total stitch counts will be 24 2 double crochet clusters, that's 6 on each side. You have 20 chain 1 spaces, 5 on each side. You've got a total of 12 chain 2 spaces because you have 4 in the corners and then 2 on each side of your granny square. So going into round 6, we are going to fill in all these holes, and we need to remember there are two chain 1s in these bigger spaces. That's going to become apparent why in a moment. So for round 6, we begin with our chain of 2, that does not count, and we're going to work a double crochet into the top of where we joined, so into that same space that we joined, and that counts as a double crochet in this round. We're going to work 1 double crochet into the top of each stitch and each chain 1 space across. So we've got a chain 1 space next, so we're working 1 double crochet into that chain 1 space, and then we're working into the top of our 2 double crochet cluster. I'm just inserting my hook right into the top of that stitch there to work my next double crochet. We then have a chain 1 space where we work another double crochet, working into the top of that next 2 double crochet cluster. This is a chain 2 space, so we're going to work 2 double crochets into this one. So that was number 1 and this is number 2. You can work directly into the spaces if you want to, rather than have to work into the chains themselves. It makes it a little bit quicker. We're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches, which takes us over to our corner. Into our corner, we are working 2 double crochets. That's 2. We do a chain of 2 and a further 2 double crochets into that chain 2 corner space. Make sure you move those stitches out of the way to find that first stitch, and we're working 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain space across. So that's 1 and 2. This is a chain 2 space, so we're working 2 double crochets into that chain 2 space, and then we're working 1 double crochet into each of the top of each stitch and chain 1 space, and that will take us over to our chain 2 space. We're just filling in all these gaps, and it will make the 2 double crochet cluster stitches really stand out between those separate rows, or rounds should I say. Just making sure I've worked into the top of that previous one. And then we're over to our chain 2 space where we work 2 double crochets. We just have those last 2 double crochets to work into the top of, so that was 1 and 2, and that brings us over to our corner where we are working 2 double crochets, a chain of 2 and a further 2 double crochets. I'm going to give you a close-up look of this to show you what I've worked. Let me bring my hook out of the way. So we started over in this corner with our 2 double crochets into our corner. We worked 1 double crochet into the next, 2 double crochets into that larger chain 2 space, and then we've got a double crochet into the top, into our chain 1, all the way across to our next chain 2 space where we work the 2, 1 double crochet into each of the next 2, brings us to our corner. So if you're doing a stitch count across each side, which is what I tend to do personally, you should have a total stitch count from your corner to your other corner between those 2 chain 2 spaces in the corners of 23 double crochets. We're going to repeat this down the next 2 sides, and I'm going to meet you in our final corner once again. Just make sure you find that first stitch to work into that does sometimes get hidden. Move your corner out of the way and follow it up from your post. Ready to work 1 double crochet into each stitch and chain across. Remembering you have 2 spaces here to work into, so you need to place 2 double crochets. Continue around and I'll meet you after you've reached your final corner for us to work those last few stitches together, making sure we don't miss any of those chain 1 or chain 2 spaces, and working into the top of each stitch. So I've worked around to my final corner, and I'm just working in the same manner, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 2, which brings us to that chain 2 space where we work 2 double crochets. And we're just going to continue across, making sure we work into the top of each stitch and chain 1 space. Just getting over to the end so I can make sure that none of us miss that very last pesky chain 1. So this is actually a chain 1 space because we have to make sure we work into that. So I'm just making sure you've worked into your final chain 1 space. We're going to join to the top of this double crochet. So we skip the chain 2, joining into the top of our stitch to complete round 6. I really like this square. I hope I get to make more of it. At the end of round 6, you should have a total stitch count of 92 double crochets and your 4 chain 2 spaces in your corners. Round 7 is a lovely easy one. We're going to start with a chain of 1 that does not count as a stitch, and we are simply going to be working 1 US single crochet into each stitch across to the corner. This is the same as a UK double crochet, so we're just inserting, bringing a loop up and pull through 2. So continue across to your first corner. Into our chain 2 corner spaces, we are working 2 single crochets, a chain of 2, and a further, really so tempted to yarn over, a further 2 single crochets. Now this corner stitch is definitely going to be hidden, so make sure you pull your stitches out of the way to work into that first stitch right after your corner. And we're continuing around on each side, working 1 single crochet into each stitch across. Just going to repeat that corner of 2 single crochets, a chain 2, and a further 2 single crochets. On each side of your square, you should have a stitch count of 27 on this round, because I know this makes it easier for counting, and that will just make sure that you haven't missed those first stitches after your corner. So continue around, working 1 single crochet into each stitch around, working 2 single crochets, a chain 2, and a further 2 single crochets into your corner spaces, and I'll meet you to fasten off and make that invisible join to give this square the perfect finish. So I'm just working my final single crochet, and instead of slip stitching to join, which is what I would normally do, I'm going to grab my scissors and just leave my hook in the stitch where it is, fastening off about maybe 6 or 7 inches, bringing that all the way through and up out of that last stitch that we made. I'm then going to grab my darning needle and thread that onto my, this is a needle, and we're going to, instead of slip stitching to join, we're going to insert our needle underneath both loops of that stitch we would have slip stitched to, and bring it all the way through, pulling quite tightly so that you don't create an additional stitch. And then we go back through the stitch that this is coming out of, going through the back loop only, making sure that that stitch disappears, because then we're not adding to our stitch count. And I'm just going to loop through the back of this loop here, not through the stitch itself, it's just the loop at the back, and make a little knot. Oh, yarn's nearly come off, there we are. And then we can make a nice little knot and no one will know it's there. Just going to pull that up and that up, and there we have a near invisible join. It would probably help if it wasn't worked in a different colour. It's done that on the last few squares. So there we have our disgusted square. Your stitch count at the end of round 7 will be 108 single crochets. I hope you've enjoyed making your very own disgusted square, or a square using the 2 double crochet cluster. I really like how chunky they are, and I love these extra chain 2 spaces in the corners as well. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you in the next video.